G'day, everyone. Welcome to tonight's global update, and I hope everyone had a great Australia Day, and uh, and uh, and that everything's going well. Okay, let's get into it. Um, Starting with our global trends as normal. One of the things, it's not playing the game. Um, One of the things on our series of war is coming is the rise of gold and silver. Um, Gold and silver is a um, it's a safe haven when the world goes crazy or when uh, governments aren't trusted. And this is mainly coming out of Europe. The drive into gold and silver is coming out of Europe. People are flooding out of Europe. There's billions fleeing the EU because they know war's coming. And anyone who is in the know, any insider, uh, typically knows that a war is coming before the population do. And the population gets screwed because they leave their cash in bank, they don't convert it to hard assets, they don't move it out of the way, out of harm's way, because they just don't see the signals coming. And at the moment, the signals are coming fast and furious. And there is just basically now it's when the bullets start flying. That's sort of where we are in the world. Gold and silver being where they are only going to keep increasing in price, I think, and that's to do more with as I said, the trust, the low trust in government. Plus, if you're an enemy, you don't want to be caught with having piles of your enemy's cash because they'll just freeze it. And we saw that with Russia, what the US did to Russia, what the Swiss did to Russian citizens, and Switzerland basically went, if you're a Russian citizen with an account in Switzerland, all your money is frozen, and um, Russians fled their cash to other safe havens around the world. The Europeans are doing the same thing. The Chinese are doing the same thing. The Indians are doing the same thing. America is doing the same thing. It is drawing back its cash and its gold, and excuse me, back to its safe haven. So this is just the the symptom of war, and we're also seeing it in Iran. The leaders in Iran are fleeing their money out of Iran now, mainly in crypto, because they're a bit more sanctioned than the rest of the world. But it is just absolutely fleeing, and then it's going to safe havens like gold. It's going into commodities. It's going to purchase land. It's going to purchase um, things that don't get severely affected or things that thrive during war, right? So production, manufacturing, right? So what happens when there's a major war on, especially when it's not in your backyard, is that supply lines need to be kept up, whether that's food, bullets, equipment, whatever it is. So manufacturing facilities. And there is a rise at the moment into the manufacturing space for acquisitions. And it's pretty much been driven all by the fear of war. Um, so watch the gold and silver markets and watch other hard assets all flee. Even some of the foreign purchases of land in Australia and that are more about parking cash than anything else, because you don't want it parked with a foreign enemy. So that's the main driver behind gold and silver at the moment. This will flow into platinum. And the reason it'll flow into platinum is purely and simply that platinum is another precious metal, that is seen as a store of wealth, especially in the modern context. Um, the and because it's a more reasonable price at the moment, that to gold or silver, depending on where you see things are, um, you might as well buy a non-correlated asset. The other one is um, copper, which is the big industrial metal. That is being seen as a buy at the moment from people that like to hoard assets, aluminium, and so forth. So there you go, guys. Gold and silver, massive leading precursor to what we're going to see in on the ground in a war. So Trump makes a pilgrimage to Davos, and we're actually seeing more and more of this. Milei was at Davos, Nigel Farage was at Davos, Viktor Orban, and several others that are all right nationalists. Uh, they were all at Davos, and they're basically all saying the same thing. Um, Globalization and your new world order bullshit is over. Um, Trump basically went to deliver a message of surrender now or end up in a war that you'll never win. The only way to turn your economies and everything around, and we're seeing that with the BRICS nations, is a grow, baby, grow. Internal consumption. The German and European model of let's become a exporter doesn't turn out so well, and China, India, and most of Asia is seeing the same thing. But what China, India, and the rest of Asia, Indonesia, for so forth, have over what Europe didn't have is the population. China is turning its economy from an export economy to a consumption-based economy in a very fast way. And they're doing that because they don't want to be connected any further to Europe. They're actually starting to distance themselves from Europe. They're still very much wanting to push wealth and commodity trades into the US and the Western Hemisphere, and that'll become a very large trading pact. So will Africa once Africa works out which side it's going to be on and how it's going to grow itself. Um, but it's amazing how most lefty idiots just can't see what's going on, and it's right in front of their face. The mainstream media reported this just woefully. There is everything that Trump said in his speech at Davos and everything he said in every um, meeting thereafter was that what you're doing in Europe is dying. Mass migration is killing your country. Globalization is killing your country. Stopping freedom of speech is and all that cultural war crap is killing your country. And that is what Trump is absolutely going against. You'll see my comment up there. Trump wants to bring back a strong, thriving, home-owning middle class that has multi-generational wealth prospects. That is MAGA in an absolute single, 20-word statement. Without a strong middle class that can buy their own homes, that can raise children, that can pass the wealth, and when we talk about wealth here, it's the house, maybe a little bit in the bank, um, from generation to generation, without having it ripped up in front of them through wealth taxes and all the other bullshit that's going on, is you basically don't have a modern society. It's as simple as that. Right? Without a strong middle class, you do not have a modern, thriving society and economy at all. Right? And the the entire European elites are shitting themselves. But those that want to align with this philosophy and this thing in mind of having a great middle class and having a bigger economy because of it, um, they're all bowing to Trump, saying thank you for saying it. And they are all rushing out to try and do the changes so that they can actually implement this in their own countries. And it works. You only have to look at what Milei has done in Argentina, how he changed that country around in what, 18 months. How Viktor Orban in Hungary is turning that country around and keeping that country strong. What Poland's doing on the cultural front, you know, not less to say what's happening in Russia, what's happening all through the developing CIS states, the Middle East. They all know that you need a strong, thriving middle class. And that is what we're seeing. We are not, we're basically now seeing the total destruction of all the European elite monarchy bullshit. And this is where I think Australia, the next major jump and change that Australia needs to do is sever itself from the British monarchy. We need to become a republic, and we need to have our head of state that is governed, sorry, our head of state that is elected by the people, and is for the Australian people. The British Commonwealth and the British Empire is dead. They have killed it themselves. It could have been the British Empire. I thought a couple of years ago that the return of the British Empire um, was possible, but basically Charles and even William and Kate have destroyed it. If you have a look at the privileged society that they want, um, and how they are trying to basically push that throughout the British Commonwealth, is just going to destroy the British Commonwealth. So our next big referendum in Australia will be a republic one, and it will need to be fast, and it would need to be a part of the change that Australia needs to bring in, basically to see ourselves turn around. So I think it's actually part of our process now of turning around, so we can get back to the same mantra of grow, baby, grow, and having a nice, strong middle class like we did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Um, so so there we are. The whole thing about Davos was basically Trump going and telling the Europeans to, you know, pull their head in, and if you don't, he's just going to leave them and let them sink. Um, so so if they go, or not if, when they go to war with Russia, Russia will wipe out Europe. There will be no Europe left. So there we go. That's Trump at Davos. Um, there. So Iran. I in my last one I said that uh, so I just got a couple of questions here. Uh, who do you see could be a leader of quality in an Australian republic? I'll sort of touch on that as we go down the line, but there at the moment there isn't anyone. Um, so in the last one I said that I didn't include Iran in it, and I'll do a touch on Iran um, this week, and so I will. The Iran's a very special case. The mainstream media are hardly reporting it. Um, it's nearly total blackout on a lot of the main news sites and the talking head podcasters that don't want to see regime change. And the reason they don't want to see regime change is, and this is probably going to be a bit controversial, is they want to see Israel the primary democratic leader in the Middle East. They want to see it. They want to see it, the open persecution of it. They want to be able to use it for destroying other countries through war and so forth. Um, and a free Iran stops that. Right. Uh, there is hundreds of thousands of protesters on the street, and still today, we're I think we're 3, 4 weeks into this thing now, and it's still going. The regime did crush some. They killed over 20,000 protesters, they believe. And look, I probably shouldn't use the word protesters. Freedom fighters, I suppose, is probably a better word because they are trying to get rid of the cruel regime that they're under. The problem with the Islamic regime, it is not like a normal government, right? What you've got to think about with how it's structured is think of it like uh, concentric circles, right? Pretty much how a feudal king would run his country, right? So we had the regime, the head in the middle, him and everyone in the middle in their castle, right? Big moat around it, big strong walls, everything in there. And if he wasn't in this castle, he was hiding in a castle down the road because they got him out at night, but it would still look like he was in the center. And that is how Iran works. The regime in the center are very protected. No one gets to them. Very, very few people have any access or control. Then the second layer out is sort of your politicians, your army head, your military heads who have more to protect than just the regime because if if the freedom fighters get to them, they're gone. Right? They're the ones that the freedom people take out, and then the regime is toppled next. And then it sort of works out from there. Then you've got different army units, you've got different bureaucrats and everything, and it just goes down. And the further you get away from the center, the weaker your connection is. So the people protesting, say that if there was 5 rings, the people protesting are in rings 4 and 5. They're furthest away from the regime, but that said, they're the most persecuted, right? They're the ones that have the less freedom. The freedom goes into the center, right? Because these guys have all the money, they have all the power, they do whatever they want. And then the video I showed a couple of sessions ago about the keys, you've got the leader, the next key, and the next key, and your key gets weaker and weaker and doesn't open as many doors the further you get out. That's Iran, right? Um, it is very, very, very structured in a way that is brutal and very heavy fisted in its approach to anything to do with the people. All right, and the people. They really don't care about the people. Um, that said, regime change does look likely. Now, will it be this week? Will it be next week? Will it be this year or next year? Not sure. Um, the US has moved to carry a strike group in. Donald Trump's come out and said that, you need to get this peacefully sorted, or otherwise I'm coming in. Israel in the background are basically telling Trump to do nothing. And the reason is what I've said before is it diminishes Israel power, and I'll go into that in a bit more later. Um, the biggest problem with the movement, there is no local leader. So the son of the Shah, Pahlavi, Pavel, I can never pronounce his name, that is in exile, is not in the country and doesn't have very good communication ties into the country because his father and then himself have been in exile for 50 years, 47 years, 50 years. Um, and they have some tentacles into the country, but they pretty much have just left the country alone. They basically forgot about it for 30 of the 47 years. And it's only recently they've started to come back into alignment with it. So the people need to find a leader and a structure that can help them be more more strategic in their approach to getting rid of the regime, and that's what is sort of needed on the ground, but it'll sort themselves out, and they have to sort themselves out. It can't be done from external. It has to be done from in on the ground in the country. The other thing that I find very, very interesting, and I forgot to mention it in there as well, is mainstream, as I said before, no mainstream media are basically not on board with this, and that's because of pretty much Israel and its lobby. But all the Free Palestine protesters and all the protesters around the place are nowhere to be seen about Iran. They will never talk about Iran. They will never talk about this because if Iran falls and the regime changes, everything in the Middle East changes. Everything in the Middle East changes. So the fall of Iran for the Middle East matters. Iran will slowly become basically the largest democracy in the Middle East. Iran's 90 million people versus what Israel's 5 million or 4 million people, whatever it is. So all of a sudden, all the people that say that Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East, Iran becomes the democracy in the Middle East. Um, Iran will become the largest secular nation in the Middle East. It will go back to its Persian roots. It won't happen overnight. Even when the Shah was in, it was still Shia Islam, but it was a very weak Shia Islam. Um, but a lot of the people that are rising up still have what's it, Zoro and the Asdian culture, which is the old Persian religion, right? And that Persian religion predates the Christian religions, predates the Torah, predates any of that. It's been around for uh, 4,000 years. It's a very old religion. So a very strong Iran, and what it was back in the 50s, if you go back to the 50s and 60s, Iran was a very strong leader and very culturally wise. It was the Paris of the East. Universities were world renowned. Same with Afghanistan, by the way. Afghanistan and Iran worked very close with each other and had top medical institutions and top museums and culture and heritage and all that sort of stuff. And Iran's very rich in resources: gold, silver, uranium, molybdenum, heaps of other iron ore, and all sorts of other things, oil, gas, of course. But it opens all those resources up to the world. Trade and commerce in the Middle East grows really quickly. When you got 90 million people all wanting to consume something, and because you can actually spin up the economy, um, because it's been there before, so there's still some memory of a very powerful economy in the country, they can spin it up. The A free Iran basically secures the Middle East. It stops the money, the weapons going to Hamas and Hezbollah. It will stop any potential war with Israel. Israel and Iran pre 79 were very close friends. They had a lot. They had a lot of working relationships, and they did a lot together. And a free Iran, where it is in the center of the Middle East, there will basically create a great link between the Middle East and the East being Asia. And having all that sorted out, having basically the CIS states and Iran, the rest of the Middle East all linking up with the powerful nations, India, China, Russia, Indonesia, and so forth, you are going to have a very, very powerful trading bloc. So Iran really matters, and it matters a lot to that part of the world, but part of the world going forward. The other thing that it does is if it cleans up and gets itself up and going, and the wars are all settled, and the other Islamic terrorist regimes that are in the region all start to fall and clean themselves up, um, Europe is isolated. Europe has no reason to exist, pretty much, even though it will because it's the original, it's the old world, and it's where everything comes from. But in its current form, Europe is just no consequence anymore. None. Zip, zero, zilch. And this is what we're seeing now between now and 2030, 2032. We will see the major changes of empire happen. And we were starting to see these play out. America will retreat to its Western Hemisphere, and it will grow the Western Hemisphere into a massive trading and economic bloc and be very similar in its outlook. We'll start to see the rise and the whole pivot back into Asia, right? And it won't be just one country in Asia. It'll be the entire Asian Middle Eastern bloc that is going to be the next powerhouse for the next 200 years. Europe no longer matters. No one's going to give a flying stuff about Europe. The third world that will be left will be Africa. The warlords and the idiots and the black rights governments that are in Africa will become the next playground. Now, one of the things that could happen, and I had this pointed out to me the other day, is that Europe will go through its current war that it's about to have. After that, it will then pivot and focus on Africa. It'll leave the Middle East. It'll leave the global financial system that it tried to inflict on the rest of the world, especially the British Empire tried to inflict on the rest of the world, controlling the world by money. And it will pivot towards Africa because it's the weaker nation. But Europe won't be Europe. There will be no European Union, right? So once Iran falls and gets rid of the current regime and the old line comes back, that's the last domino that basically makes Europe irrelevant and brings back the total pivot to the Middle East and Asia, or the Asian empire, which will then take over going forward. So that is why Iran is very pivotal. Trump sees it. Everyone sees it. It needs to organically happen more than anything, or otherwise it won't succeed. Right? Whenever you have someone else from an outside influence push over the domino, the the it doesn't cascade the rest of the dominoes. It just takes out one or two at the top. But from internal, when you do it from the internal and you push the other way and you flop all the dominoes back towards the center, then it absolutely has a lasting effect. And that's what needs to happen in Iran. Same as in Venezuela. Trump knew he could take Maduro out, and then he could put pressure on the rest of the regime to change their ways, and they're doing it. Cuba will be next in the Western Hemisphere, and that'll be enough, I think, then to shake up Nicaragua, Peru, Bolivia, and the other recalcitrant South America or Central American nations. Brazil's going to sort itself out and get rid of its leftist government. That's underway at the moment. So there you go, folks. That's my take on Iran. So pivoting towards Australia, we've had a bit of an interesting couple of weeks. Albo finally got his hate speech laws through, but they were watered down. Basically strengthens 18C a bit, which was the original laws passed by the Liberals. And that's why the Liberals really didn't want to change these laws too much and were happy to support them, is because they're basically their laws, right? You've got to remember that the Liberals wanted this more than anyone, and that was part of the biggest divide with the coalition, especially with the Nationals, is that they basically never learnt from when they introduced these laws before. It's moved from targeting individuals to targeting groups. The wording is terrible when it comes to this, and it could be open. You could actually see this being used against a political party like One Nation very easily, very, very easily. It could be used against podcasters, because if you're seen as a group, 2 or 3 people that get together and do a podcast, it could be used against you. It could be used against any organization at all. It targets the wrong people. The by allowing the way it's been written to, or the laws to be written, it basically means that it's open slather on white Christians because everyone else got protections, even under 18C, under the original laws, that everyone got protections except white Christians. And to me, that is scary because that shows you the true underlying position that these Fabian-driven socialists or Marxists have. And the thing is, with socialists, with Marxists, their number one thing is to get rid of faith, and you get rid of the underlying faith of the nation. So the underlying faith of Australia, or most Western nations, is Christianity. Right? So these laws are just furthering everything that Albo and half the liberals out there, the moderate liberals out there, believe in. That's Marxism. We're at the top, you're at the bottom, you do as I say, fuck off. That's exactly what they believe. That's exactly what they want. The only way we can combat that is with strong voters that have an IQ. At the moment, a lot of the voters out there are very low IQ people. They come from the place of what's in it for me, not what's in it for the country. And that's how you end up in the place that we are at the moment. So moving on to the centre-right parties, they're just all over the place. If you have a look at the centre left, so Labor, Greens, right out to the Socialists, they're in great harmony and have been now for quite a few years. But the centre right is all over the place. The coalition split because it's basically, socialists on one side and nationalists on the other. And I, the only reason that they'll get back together again, and it will destroy my next point, is that they will they the Nationals and Liberals will get back together again, form the coalition purely and simply because they warrant their own jobs more than the good of the country. The moderate Liberals will do this all day, every day. They will drive to bring the coalition back together because it's about their jobs and their power. And that's all it's about to them. They don't give a flying fuck about anyone out in the population. They are just there to make sure that they get re-elected. And they even talk that way. Oh, we can't do anything if we're not elected. Well, you don't do anything when you're elected. So what's the point of electing you? Right? So they're all about just being elected. They're terrible. Absolutely a waste of space, really. Modern liberals. But that then leads me to say the three or four major forces. And when I talk, guys, I'm doing it more from a Queensland perspective because that's really what I know. There are so many centre-right parties out there, but they're state-based, they're small, they've got no real drive or kick, and can't be a force anywhere. One Nation is driving a great stride in the polls, but the problem is it has no real structure. They're just starting branches now. They're just looking at pre-selection processes. They have a bit of a ground game, but they don't really have much. The problem with a lot of the centre-right parties is the minor parties, anyway, or if you want to call them freedom parties, is their supporters are loud, but they don't get off the fucking couch. Right? I go to some of these minor party branch meetings or or gatherings. They're gatherings, they're not branches because they're not fucking structured in any way. And all they do is talk, but there's no action. The one thing that the coalition, the Libs, the Nats, and Labor, fuck, I love how Labor campaign is. They have what we call game. In the political world, they have a ground game. They have the software that tracks people. They have the volunteers who are rabid that are out there every single Saturday beating the drum at some local market. They have volunteers. They have people on staff that are there doing phone calls, that are doing mail outs, that are doing social media. They're not doing it in a volunteer way. They are doing it in a professional manner. And I don't care, everyone out there can disagree with me, but I've been in the machine long enough to know that unless you treat it like a fucking business, you do not win. And it's simple as that. If you want it to be lovey-dovey volunteering and that, you do not win. You need to raise large amounts of cash to put the team together, to have the skills, to get the PR firms, to get the airtime, to get the media, to absolute cut through. And none of the centre-right parties are at that point yet. One Nation, as I said, has no real structure. They're starting to do it, and they have no real ground game. They've got a central headquarters, they've got people employed, but they don't have that ingrained depth of knowledge that comes with having members of parliament at multiple levels of government and having staffers that are running around. Senators are different to MPs. Upper house, lower house staffers work different. Policy works different, right? And a Senate is a house of review. It's not a house of government, right? So it is different, and that's why you need to have that in Parliament being people first. Jared Rennick, love him, love the party, supporting it to death. But at this point in time, it's just too small. The game's not there, right? And when you talk to a lot of people at these meetings, and this is One Nation meetings, People First meetings, UAP meetings, they're all, oh, community, oh, this, oh, it's got to be. There is no mongrel in these people to be able to fight the likes of Labor. None. And this is, and I find it hard to talk to a lot of these people is because their heart's in the right place. They really want to see change. They really want to do everything, but they don't understand how basically a prick and a cunt you've got to be to actually win as a minor party, right? Have a look at Nigel Farage in the UK of how he has to beat everyone with a stick every single day to make it happen. And he had to get into Parliament again to have the most effect. Because when you're in Parliament and you have people on the floor, one, you have staff automatically. Two, you have party status automatically, right? Because you only need one member. That's why the UAP is still a party. It's got Senator Babbitt, right? It is still a party in the eyes of polling and in the eyes of the media, right? When you do not have anyone in Parliament, you are not deemed to be a party. You're not deemed to even be in the race, right? And that's why the likes of Lambie and the likes of the Central Alliance, so Rebecca Sharkey in South Australia, that's why they can raise money and that's why they can keep in the game. It's because they're recognised. It's why they all start parties when they leave other parties, is because it is the only way to be structured to fight the game, to get the money in, to get the support in, to get the people in and do it. So And then you got Katter in Queensland, you got the shooters, fishers, and farmers in New South Wales. And at some point, the centre right's got to wake up to itself, and some of these single-ish leaning parties are going to have to either get out of the road or they're going to have to merge, form alliances, and do it loud and proud with other groups, um, and build a really big centre right alliance. That brings me to um, a question I've been pondering myself. Are the Nats the party we've been looking for? Um, if you quickly have a look at the Nats, they've got federal, state, and local level. So they're at all three levels in all houses, right, across the country. Um, they're strong election performers. They don't lose seats that easily. The last seat they lost was Barnaby, but he walked out, didn't lose at an election, and he kept his seat at the election. And 2016, if 2016 and 2019, if the Nationals didn't keep their seats and keep their numbers up where they were, Turnbull and Morrison would have got annihilated. So the Nationals were the key to the coalition in those two elections. So they've got strong election performance. They've got a great ground and brand structure. They're 115-year-old for crying out loud. They're the second, I think the Nationals are the second oldest political party, Labor being number one. They've got a ground game. They know how it works. They know how to get the branch structure up and running. They know how to get into the local communities. They know how to operate an election. An election doesn't happen 6 weeks before polling. The election starts today, right? And the reason the Nats, the Labor, the Liberals, and all that are so good is because they have small branches or small teams in the local electorates that are slowly working every day. Like it's getting harder for the Nats and the Libs because they are losing members to the likes of One Nation. But when they're at their strength, they are chipping away every day because their members are at lunches talking to people. Their members are at whatever. Their local members are being dragged to backroom political functions to drag in the dollars, and that seeps out and moves down. So they have a ground game. You can build on their base. 100-year-old old political party, you build on their base very well. And I know a lot of people, if they had the right leader, they had the right positions, would flood back to the Nats. One strong thing that would give One Nation the game that it needs and the structure that it needs is if it merged with the Nats, took on the Nats structure, took on the Nats ways of doing stuff. Because the problem with One Nation at the moment, even though Pauline said branches will do pre-selections, I bet you when it comes to the crunch, Pauline and James Asprey will still select the candidates. That is just how it be. Pauline still thinks that she needs to control everything. She is a dictator when it comes to her party. So that is the hard part. But if One Nation merged in all other states except Queensland, the reason I say that is Queensland's a unique beast at the moment. And if Queensland, the LNP in Queensland decided to sit as its own parliamentary team, so they didn't sit as Libs, didn't sit as Nats, they sat as LNP, they would actually be the opposition right now. They got 24, 25 members in there, but at the federal level, those 20, I think it's 25 members are split between the Liberals and National Party rooms. So the LNP from Queensland goes and sits in two separate party rooms when it gets to Canberra, but in Queensland they sit as one. So we Queensland either has a demerger and the Nats go and form with the national Nats and the Libs, and there is some moderate Libs in Queensland that I wish would disappear, um, or the Liberal Nationals become Nationals and drop the Liberal title, which would be very hard. They would never merge with One Nation in Queensland. Too much bad blood there. One Nation is a Queensland party. It was established in Queensland. It's from Queensland. The history and the bad blood is all Queensland driven. And everyone says that it was John Howard and uh, John Howard and Tony Abbott that really put Pauline um, and David Etheridge in jail. But a lot of the background stuff was done in Queensland. It really was a Queensland push. And they were just the people that happened to be leading the party and being in Canberra at the time. So, do I think the Nationals could be it? Yes, they could. Um, they need a new leader. Colin Boyce, lovely bloke, never going to be leader. I just won't have the numbers. Politics is a numbers game. You've basically got to be liked as much as admired and have political cunning and nous. You've got to be able to do the numbers and get the numbers and keep people on your side. And sometimes that's by fear. You've got to basically fear that your MP, that the leader will basically pre-select against you. And that is just how the game works. Whether you like it or not, politics is a dirty, dirty prick of a game. And it has to be played that way. In the current world, it has to be played that way. We would all like it not to be, and that's why if you're soft and cuddly and community minded, you're going to get fucked. And that's just the way it is. And that's why most minor parties don't go anywhere and will never go anywhere, because the voters actually know it. The voters actually like, and it comes up time and time again, the politicians that have affairs, drunken scandals, um, you know, tell someone to fuck off in the street and it's caught on camera, kick a kid, drown a dog, walk on a cat. They get re-elected more and more than the oh, I'm so fucking nice people. And there is a heap of people in Canberra, heap of people in our state parliaments that are living models of that. The population know that you need someone with big brass balls. That's why Pauline does quite well. And the population know that basically soft fairies are not what they want when it comes to the mind and when it comes to putting the number on the ballot box. So watch this space, because if something's going to happen, it'll happen after the Nats find a backbone. Two things will totally destroy my vision here, and that is they don't change the leader because David Littleproud's a little prick, and he'll run back to the coalition to save his job. And two, that they reform the coalition. If they reform the coalition, then that's dead and gone, and we've lost a very big power. Labor will re-win the next election, purely and simply because One Nation, the voters from One Nation, their preferences won't flow the way that everyone thinks. And I'll show you that in a minute. So to our Politics Matters section. We've all seen some really cool, well, I like the numbers that are coming out. And this is an essential poll. There's essential YouGov news poll. There's about 20 polls that come out, but I sort of picked the latest. So this is January 20th or 23rd. It's the latest one I could find. And it's one that I could use for a reference, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. So Labor's still 31%. That means they win. The Liberal Nationals on 25, One Nation on 22. That's an outstanding number for One Nation. Greens on 9, 9, 10 is where they always are. TOP, Trumpets of Patriots, are 0. So basically, people have gone, uh, Palmer's gone, right? So that whole UAP Palmer thing is deteriorating and deteriorating quick, and other at 7. Um, my view, and I'm sorry, and then two party preferred, 49 45, and that's because there's a very large undecided number in this, but ALP win. Because when it comes, push comes to shove, you will take 3 to 4% of that, and that'll go straight to the ALP because they'll get on whoever where the feel is. A lot of undecideds walk into the ballot box and just tick who they think the winner is, and predominantly that will be the ALP in this case. So numbers are looking good, but this is some interesting data that I stumbled across. Essential poll, October 25, and the latest one. People keep saying, where is Fon's base coming from? Okay. I tried to find a one further back on this as well, about 6 months back, but I couldn't find one in the time frame. But Fond 15, 22. So they've increased by 7%. Right? So where's that coming from? TOP guaranteed because the Greens are still on 9. Other still on 7. So the TOP or UAP, Trumpets of Patriots, haven't flowed to other, hasn't flowed to the Greens, right? Hasn't flowed to the ALP, hasn't flowed to the LNP because they're negative. So it's gone to One Nation. So there's one. Oh, I've done it again. The ALP has gone from 36 to 31. It's lost 5%. The LNP has gone from 26 to 25. It's lost 1%. So out of the 7% that FON has grown, One Nation has grown in the last, what's that, 4 months, has come from the ALP. Now, and this is happening, I'm starting to see this number more and more in other polls as well, that One Nation is picking up more and more ALP voters than it is Nats, Liberals and Nats. Now, the Liberal and Nats voters is at 26, 25%, you are pretty much, you've probably got 5% left to lose before you are losing the rustodons. And what I mean by that is the people that have never ever voted or will never ever vote anything other than Liberal or National. Where that number is around the 24 to 25%. So you could basically say they're at that rustodon number now. ALP over a period of time have come from the high 30s down into the low 30s, and most of that has gone into One Nation. The problem with that is that if we had the election and we get into a two-party preferred situation where One Nation is beating the Liberal Nationals, and on this trend, you can pretty much say they are going to fit in number 2 in at least 80% of the states in Australia, seats in Australia. So it'll be ALP versus One Nation for the seat in the runoff with the preferences. But ALP wins the majority of those because the flow of the ALP votes back into the ALP and the Greens that are now sitting in One Nation. One Nation is a catch-all protest party for every single other party, ALP, Greens included. This is why the rise of One Nation will not ever in a million, billion, trillion years convert into large gains and One Nation becoming government. because it's a total protest party. But as I said, is the National Party what we have been waiting for? That could override this. If One Nation had the game on the ground and was getting their membership out, was getting their numbers out, people will join a winning whatever it is, but never ever turn up. Have a look at how many people buy gym memberships and never go to the gym. So people are getting on board the One Nation bandwagon, but will never vote One Nation. And this is telling. I'd like to actually see, three of these when we go back 12 months, and you'll see the numbers plain as day. When I saw these side by side, I looked at that and went, "Oh my God, 7% of this or more is ALP voters." So One Nation at the last election got about 8-9% of the vote. So if you take 8% out of that, boom. So what's that? 8%. So you're down to 14%. Take another 5-6% out for the Liberal Nationals that have moved over. So you're down to 8%. You might as well say 1% of those and the 7% ALP. So the One Nation number is pretty much still 8%, because the rest of it is protests from the two major parties. But we're in a unique situation now where the LNP, the Liberal Party, can be destroyed, the Nationals can rise, and One Nation won't go anywhere. There'll still be 8 to 10%. It's actually better if they do rise a little bit, get into the solid 10s, 11s, so we can have them overtake the Greens and become the party of choice in the Senate. Like the uh, the kingmakers, and the choice on, especially when it comes to legislation. We want centre right people with a balance of power. We don't want centre left. So that's where I think we're at. And uh, and if an election's called tomorrow, ALP win and they win in a landslide, I think they'd end up with over 100 seats in the parliament. And if I was an ALP strategist and I was looking at what could happen, I would look to go to an election. If this kept up for another 2 months with the turmoil in the LNP, One Nation driving where they are, the Greens flatlining, I would call a snap election. I would wipe out the Liberals. I would clean out One Nation because they don't have a ground game. And I don't think they could get their shit together in a very short period of time. Like, we're talking months, right? And most of these parties have got to get their shit together because you really need to be campaigning from November this year for the next election, uh, which is due March to July 2028. So say January 2027, you need to be in full campaign mode. But if I was the ALP, go 6 months, go middle of this year and just destroy your opposition. And I mean destroy your opposition. And they could do it. And I reckon they could do it quite well. Doesn't matter what's happening on the street. Doesn't matter how much people are campaigning, because a lot of that doesn't move into votes. And that's because most of this vote flows back up here, flows to here, this flows up to here, they win. Right. So there we go. That's my take on this week or this fortnight. Thanks, Aidan. Yeah, Zoroastrian. That's what I was thinking of. Um, Now, to answer the question on leader of equality in a republic, it will come out of a political party. And once again, the reason I say it'll come out of a political party is purely and simply because of the ground game that you'll need to get elected. right? So we're talking someone who can um, gather enough support inside their own party to then convert that into the support of the people to get it through. Having an independent person try and run and gather enough money and enough funding and enough support from individuals will be super hard, super, super hard. The referendum on on the voice was won because of the amount of people that could be gathered into a cohesive machine through the Liberal National ground game. That's pretty much uh, what the backing was. If the voice didn't have the backing of the coalition, it would have struggled because the power of a political party, and especially like the ALP is a massive party because it's got the unions and everything behind it. Well, not only the unions, it's got all the big business. Anyone who thinks the coalition has fleet has sorry has our major companies and corporations, um, Bond Street and Phillip Street corporations behind it, are just walking idiots. The people that drove the coalition, both nationals uh, and liberals back in its heyday, the John Howard years were all businesses, and they were all strong middle class people that ran farms, ran shops, were doctors, that had small business, that were striving to own their own home, were striving to create a great family. And that is where you get that cohesion from. That's the underpinning part. And it was the underpinning part of the Liberals, but they've lost it. The other problem is the other minor parties on the right don't have that. They can't gather the middle class together and drive their policies, their ideals, and everything from that middle class perspective. They're still too wishy-washy on it, and they still haven't got um, that whole um, approach yet to what really makes a strong political party, and to run a republic. Now, the big question is what type of republic we want. Now, if you actually go back to when Australia was founded and we were doing our constitution, the the type of republic that we would have been, and there was a draft constitution based on a republic, not on a constitutional monarchy or a Westminster system that we've got, was the US. So it was to have a different style of lower house, a more Westminster lower house, but um, a presidential person, that was that is our head of state, elected by the people for the people, and that was written into a version of the Constitution. I think it might even be in our version of the Federalist Papers, leading up through the Constitution, through the convention, leading up to 1901. So, uh, me personally, that I think is the only type of head of state you want, is someone elected directly by the people. Yes, it's not a perfect um, way of doing it, but I think it's also a necessary way of establishing um, that type of governance. Okay, guys, so there we are for this week. Thank you again, and thank you for helping me get through this. Zoroastrian. It's very, very interesting religion, that one, if you go and have a look at its history. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I'll end it there, and I look forward to seeing you all again in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks, guys.